Okay, guys, now we're going to talk about that historical time period too, starting with 1607, right up through the French and Indian War. So let's to come to the United States. It's not the United States, Americas. Okay, so they established something called the London Company. And King James I takes over, not very popular, and he hated the Puritans. Puritans are actually going to leave England at this point in time. But he grants a charter in 1606 to the London Company, which is a joint stock company. And the goal of a joint stock company is people put money up and they want to make more money. So basically, they pay for people to come over and find gold and silver and goods and send it back, so they will make lots and lots of money. So they finance this operation. So these are the reasons for colonization. The individuals themselves, it's always about land. Okay, so remember they had that primogeniture in England where only the oldest son could inherit. So younger sons wanted land for themselves, and that was one of the reasons that they came. We have religious freedom. That's the Puritans, the Pilgrims, the Quakers, and actually we'll talk about some others with the Huguenots and so forth. And then for financial relief, we're going to see Georgia especially being set up for people that were in debtor's prison. So Jamestown is established in 1607. It's named for King James I of England, and it is the first permanent English settlement and marked the beginning of the colony of Virginia. Problems with Jamestown. When they came in, they thought they found the perfect area on this peninsula, but it was actually swampy and mosquito infested. The land was not good for farming. There was no gold, and there was no cash crop. Now we're going to talk about how John Rolfe brings in tobacco, but that is later. So Captain John Smith is in charge, and these guys go out and they're looking for gold, and nobody's working and nobody's putting up shelters, and they're coming back and they're coming into the supplies, and he has a rule. He who doesn't work doesn't eat. Jamestown is about to fail. It is in horrible shape, and men are wanting to leave. And then a supply ship arrives, and that has women on it. So the men aren't too very fussy, and they decide they'll stay, give it a shot. We have the story about Pocahontas with daughter of Powhatan of the Pamunkeys. And did she save John Smith, or was it really just a ceremony? Disney's version has her throwing herself on top of John Smith and saving him just as the axe is about to come down. So, after the first year, 15% of the folks were left. 38 out of the original 144. There was hardly any food, and basically we talk about cannibalism. They suspect, and actually they have dug up graves and seen where they were actually chewing on each other's bones. The story goes that one colonist murdered his wife and feasted on her flesh. Two guys who were caught stealing food were actually tied to those posts that you've seen where their heads and their hands are in the post, and they were left to starve as a warning to others. And this is called the starving time. So Jamestown going through some very, very difficult times, and then here comes Lord de la Warr. And Lord de la Warr was a soldier, and he used something called the Irish tactics. And the Irish tactics were he wanted food, so how was he going to get it? He went into the Indian villages, burned them down, and took their crops. This did not, of course, make the Pamunkey very happy, and you're going to end up with the Anglo Powhatan War. And we are having several of those, 1610 to 1614, long time. The English won, and then there's another one about 8 years later, and the English are going to win, and the Pamunkey are effectively pushed out of the area. So, enter John Rolfe. And John Rolfe he sneaks in some tobacco seeds. And this soil around Jamestown is perfect for tobacco. They start planting, and now it's an addictive tobacco, obviously, and they're shipping it back to Europe. People are addicted to it, and there's more and more, and Virginia is going to thrive because of the cash crop of tobacco. Pocahontas has been kidnapped at this point in time, but she actually stays at Jamestown. She's converted to Christianity, and she changes her name to Rebecca. John Rolfe falls in love and marries Pocahontas. He actually takes her to England. They have a son, and she dies of pneumonia, and she is still very, very young. However, her son eventually comes back to the Americas, marries. He has many sons. They marry. They have many sons and daughters, and actually there are quite a few people who can claim that they are descendants from Pocahontas. So when they come back, John Rolfe meets with Powhatan to tell him how sorry he was. Powhatan says, yeah, let's mourn together, and he attacks John Rolfe and his people. It was actually a setup. He was pretty ticked off that his daughter had died. So these are the portraits of Pocahontas. This is probably the one on the left top. It looks more like her than any of the others. Of course, you have the Disney version, and this is on the right, another portrait of Pocahontas. So you can see those two kind of look a little alike, but they don't look a whole lot like the Disney character. So tobacco is being planted. They need labor. And what they come up with to get labor for the tobacco fields is a system called the headright system. And that's basically bringing over indentured servants from England. Now remember, we said that England was very bad economic shape. People wanted to get out of England. And so basically they signed away their life for they signed a contract anywhere between 3 and 7 years. And they were given the board to come over, and they pledged to work for that benefit to come to the Americas. So somebody with skills, perhaps a blacksmith, a carpenter, a really good cook, they would work for maybe 3 years. Somebody with no skills would be out in the fields in maybe 7 years. Now the people who paid to bring those others over were given 50 acres of land. So this is how a lot of the original Virginia, the first families of Virginia, ended up with so much land, because they paid for all these indentured servants to come over, settle the land for the king, because remember, the mother country was making money off of this, and they ended up getting 50 acres of land granted to them by the monarchy. So who's really benefiting? Actually, the landowners are getting a lot of free labor. Some of the indentured servants were treated very badly. Some were treated well. But there were over 100,000 indentured servants brought over between this time period of about 1615 to 1700. As government, now this is important, and you need to kind of star this, remember this. The House of Burgesses is the first formal government set up in the colonies. And this is set up in 1619. This is the same year that the first slaves are going to arrive in the Americas as well. So again, this is the elite. 22 wealthy landowners are the ones who are part of this gathering, and that there is a royal governor who is appointed. These are the first families of Virginia that we're going to hear, the Robert E. Lee families, George Washington families, the Custis, which was George Washington's wife, Fitzhughs. These are the, we call them the FFV, First Families of Virginia. Now, Jamestown becomes bankrupt. James I appoints Governor William Berkley, and Berkley is going to be governor of Jamestown and that Jamestown colony for years. He is going to be there a long, long time. Now, 100,000 indentured servants, and as these indentured servants are getting their freedom, they're wanting land. Well, there's no available land, so they're moving to the west. And as they're moving to the west, there's still Indians out there, and Indians are attacking them. Berkley is not protecting these freed indentured servants, and they take matters into their own hands. So he doesn't want them attacking the Indians. He's actually doing some trade with them, and these indentured servants organize and they attack the Indians. They're also spreading out, these indentured servants are also spreading out to what we're calling the Chesapeake colonies, into Maryland, Western Virginia, which actually the border is much further than what the current boundary is. So, these indentured servants, they're rising up, they're angry at the governor who has been there for 30 years, they're frustrated, they want land, they want wives. And their leader, Nathaniel Bacon, becomes their organizer. He organizes, now notice the date, 1676. So we're looking at 100 years before the Declaration of Independence, and this is going to be the first rebellion against royal authority. Since the governor isn't protecting them, the royal authority is not protecting them, he takes matters into his own hands. Then they march on Jamestown and demand that Berkley step down, and they burn Jamestown. Note the date, 1676. This is one of my favorite videos. I want you to watch this, and this will explain to you very, very graphically exactly what happened with Bacon's rebellion. So, in the aftermath, Bacon dies, dysentery. Berkley crushes the rebellion. He executes rebels, and the royal authority is reestablished. But what it does is it kind of upsets the whole system. So instead of the indentured servant labor source, now they're looking for a less rebellious labor source. This is going to lead to expansion of the slave trade.